So we have seen what user-defined function is and how to create your own user-defined function. Now we're going to look at docstring. What is a docstring and why do we need to use it? In the previous chapters, we have talked about how a team is organized and why functions written by one team can be used conveniently by other teams or within the same team. So the business logic team has written a function to calculate the interest on a bank account, and it requires three parameters: 1, 2, 3, and it returns the interest amount. Well, this programmer sitting here and writing this function is very intimate with this logic, meaning he knows all the intricacies of calculating interest. What happens if we don't send the interest rate? What happens if we don't send the number of days? What if the amount exceeds a certain value? What if the amount is too low? I'm just giving you very trivial examples of complications, but in a real-time project, this is going to be pretty complicated. Well, how does this person or programmer sitting in this team understand how to use this function? There are a couple of ways to make this happen. One quick way is to use something called as a docstring. Docstring. So it basically is documentation, a very quick documentation that the Python programmer who has returned this function can provide to the user of this function. Now there are other ways to do it, like actual documentation, Python documentation, that can be provided like in a PDF or on a web page, so on and so forth. But as you program your logic, this programmer over here might not be able to refer to the documentation every time. So this document string provides an easy way for the user of a function to understand what this function does. Let me give you an example. For example, we have created a function like this, right? Good. Now I want to calculate the interest. I'm a user of this function. So calculate underscore interest, right? And then each editor, in this case I'm using Jupyter. I could use Visual Studio Code, I could use PyCharm, any different editor. Each editor has a way to prompt what this function does. For example, if I do a shift tab, I do a shift plus tab. In case of Jupyter, I'm going to talk about Visual Studio Code in a minute. So when you say shift tab, Jupyter as an editor gives me this little pop-up box that gives me what's the signature of this function, meaning how many parameters does this function take. The reason why this is interesting is because this function, the logic and everything in that function is something that you might not be aware of. So for example, the team A, the business logic team, has created this function and then asked you to just use it. So you just know the name of the function. You don't know what are the parameters it takes, what is the logic, what's the return. You don't know anything of that. So imagine I want to use this function without knowing what's in that function. So you don't know what's in that function, you just know the name of the function, right? So calculate tab, and then now how many parameters does this function take? Well, I don't know. I can refer to the documentation that the provider of that function has created, or I can just do a shift tab in the case of Jupyter, and this pop-up comes up. It's not a lot, but it gives us something, at least the input parameters, which is the account balance, interest, and the number of days. Now it's easy for me to just quickly write the function. Okay, I need three parameters: balance, $1,000, and then what is the second one? Shift tab again. Interest, okay, interest is 4%, and then what's the third one? It's days. right? Shift enter. That was easy, right? It makes the life of a programmer that's using the function easy. That's prompting on what the function does. Now we didn't come to the docstring yet. When we said shift tab, there's no docstring, meaning there's no written text like a sentence or a couple of sentences on what this function does. Well, in this case, the name of the function is descriptive enough. It says calculate underscore interest. So the name is pretty obvious. Sometimes the name is not all that obvious. What if you want to calculate the interest and it's a current account, not a savings account? Maybe there's a separate function for that, and the definition of the function goes something like this. Now, for those of us who are not familiar with the way a bank functions, I might not know what CURR means, or what SAV for savings account, what SAV means. It will be nice if there's some kind of a documentation. So the way you create documentation, simple documentation using docstring, is something like this. Say we create a new function, right? And then just at the beginning of the function, you provide a text, and you enclose that with three triple quotes at the start, three double quotes at the start, and you enclose that with triple quotes, three double quotes at the start and three double quotes at the end. And everything you provide there is available to the developer. Let me give you an example. For example, this is what we want to have as a docstring. Okay, just put that there and enclose that in triple quotes. Execute that. Now you know what this function does, but you don't know how to use it or the specifics of that function. Now it's out of your sight, and then you say calculate interest current account, and then you do a shift tab. Now there's a docstring, calculate interest on a given balance. The key arguments are balance, which is the amount on the balance, the interest, the days, any length of a string. See, now I understand what are the input parameters and what this function does to start with, right? So that's a docstring.